All right, welcome back to New Testament Survey as we continue our look at the books of the New Testament. We continue with the book of Luke, the Gospel of Luke, as we've subtitled this Jesus as the Savior and Son of Man, from the verse Luke 19:10, where Jesus clearly just simply states, the Son of Man came to seek and to save that which was lost. So he is the Savior. He is the Son of Man. We'll look at both of those words when we get into our key words and our key verses. But let's look at the author first of all. Who wrote the book of Luke? Obviously, Luke himself. Both Luke and Acts were written about the same time by the same person, to the same person, in fact. Both Luke chapter 1, verses 1 through 4, and Acts chapter 1, verse 1, when looked at together, both mention Theophilus. This O Theophilus, in Acts chapter 1, verse 1, in the first book, I have dealt with all those things that Jesus began to do and to teach, referring to the Gospel of Luke. Of course, Luke 1, 1 through 4, referring to Theophilus as well. So the question then, who is this Luke character? We find him several times in both in the epistles mostly, where he's mentioned as the beloved physician in Colossians chapter 4, verse 14. He's from Antioch in Syria, which is where where Paul and Barnabas set out to carry the gospel forth in the first and second and third missionary journeys. Probably the most highly educated of the gospel writers, as compared to John, who was a fisherman, Matthew, a tax collector, Mark, a young man, not necessarily trained in anything that we know of, but the beloved physician. What kind of physician was he? Medical doctor? Not really sure. This is the only statement that we have, is that he was the beloved physician. We do know that he was a travel companion of Paul. And in also there in Colossians chapter 4, Paul lists out all of his companions, and he lists them according to Jew and Gentile. And Luke is mentioned amongst the Gentiles. If that's the case, then he is the only Gentile to have written any book of the entire Bible, which is quite fascinating. Also in Acts chapter 1, verse 19, he separates himself from the Jews by saying, so that the field was called in their own language, Akeldama, which is field of blood, as compared to simply saying, in Jewish in Hebrew or in the language. He says in their language, separating himself from them. So the only Gentile author of any inspired book. He's with Paul on many of his missionary journeys, and during his first Roman imprisonment, and he's also there all the way to the end of Paul's second Roman imprisonment, all the way until Paul's death, when in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 14, Paul says, only Luke is with me. So a very close companion of Paul's, which is very fitting, since he is also basically the book of Acts being Paul's biography. Not an eyewitness to the risen Christ. If you look in Luke chapter 1 and verse 2, he says that others have looked into writing the life of Christ, and so he's going to build on their work, not saying that he himself was an eyewitness, not like the Gospel of John does. So if you look at chapter 1, verses 1 through 4, we see he's writing this to Theophilus. Of course, Theophilus is a Greek name. It means lover of God, or one who loves God. He says he's most excellent. Perhaps that's saying that he's a person of good character, but more likely that's a statement about someone of high social status. Most excellent Theophilus being a term of endearment for, or not a term of endearment, but a term of respect for perhaps a high-ranking official or someone with great means or something like that. Theophilus is a believer. He says that you may know this with certainty of those things which you were instructed. So he is a believer. He has been instructed in things, but not put in order as Luke is going to do. So the audience here, primarily Greeks, who were always looking for the ultimate human being. That's kind of a Greek thing, is that you see a lot of Greek philosophy looking at who is the perfect human being. You have the Greek Olympic Games looking at who is the fastest, who is the strongest, who can jump the highest, the perfect physical form, the perfect mind, the smartest, the wealthiest, whatever that may be. The Greeks were looking for the most excellent person. The ultimate human being, of course, is the Son of Man, is Jesus Christ himself. So date and circumstances, probably during Paul's 2-year imprisonment in Caesarea, while Paul is imprisoned during Acts chapter 23, between his interview with Felix and with Festus. Luke is with him. When we look at the book of Acts, we'll see how we know that. But there, Luke is spending 2 years with Paul in Palestine, plenty of time to go out and do interviews, as he says he does in Luke chapter 1, verses 1 through 4, that he went to go research this stuff. Felix was removed as procurator in 58, replaced by Festus, so that's how we can put the limit of time there. Luke did extensive interviews with those, possibly with Mary herself, which is why when Luke says in Luke chapter 2 that she treasured these things in her heart. Well, how does he know that? Probably because he asked her. Luke could have done this while Paul was imprisoned there. The purpose for the book, to present an accurate account of the facts of the life of Christ. He says to write to an orderly account, perhaps even an account that's in chronological order. Many harmonies of the Gospels start with the book of Luke, and use that to say that he did most of his Gospel in chronological order, whereas many of the other Gospels did not. That you may have certainty concerning the things that you have been taught. I've done critical research so that you can have proofs that these things are true, and to present Christ as the perfect God-man who, after a perfect ministry, provided a perfect sacrifice for imperfect man. He would be the Savior. That's all we have for this video. We'll look at some more distinctive features of the book in the second video on this.